rejection during a transplant. So increased metabolism of cyclosporine caused by sulfonamide reduces the effectiveness of cyclosporine and can add to the kidney damage caused by cyclosporine. So that's what we are. The other point was not very clear. So as I have said, cyclosporine normally is given as an immunosuppressant. You give it to patients who have gotten kidney transplant. There's a lot of rejection of the kidney, so it's being eaten up by the host, because it is being treated like an enemy or like a food, and therefore being eaten up. So you give an immunosuppressant to try and reduce the rejection. So we are saying, therefore, when you give sulfonamides with cyclosporine, there will be increased metabolism of the cyclosporine and therefore increased toxicity. Drug interaction, we have already, I think, said, but we also said sulfonamides should not also be given with procaine penicillin, as this combination has been found to be antagonistic. So should not be given together. Sulfonamide combined with pyrimethamine are the regimen of choice for toxoplasmosis. And indeed, sulfonamides also with pyrimethamine were used, not now, in the management of malaria protozoa. But again, as we have already said, because of misuse, irrational use of sulfonamides, too much resistance and so on, that combination, especially in Kenya, has been dropped because of the increased resistance. But pyrimethamine in combination of sulfonamides, this combination was very good for protozoa. Trimethoprim with sulfonamide, especially sulfamethoxazole, was good for bacteria. So you can note pyrimethamine for protozoa and then trimethoprim for bacterial infection. Calcium ions and antacid taken with sulfonamides can also inhibit GIT absorption of the sulfonamides. Urine acidification enhances the risk for urea. Combination of sulfur drug with trimethoprim, of course, has synergistic antibacterial activity, which we have mentioned. They do also inhibit the metabolism of phenytoin. So you can see the phenytoin, again, a very important drug in the management of epilepsy. It's an anticonvulsant with the metabolism of phenytoin. And torbutamide. Torbutamide is an important, it's a hypoglycemic agent. Torbutamide is a hypoglycemic agent. We have also said warfarin and enhance their action. And of course, not only will they inhibit the metabolism of warfarin, we have also talked about drug interaction in terms of binding of the proteins. They displace methotrexate, which is of course an anti-cancer, from binding and decrease its renal excretion and therefore toxicity. Fixed dose combination of are banned in India because we have said the two combinations are antagonistic. So you can see this is a drug. It's a simple drug, very simple structure, but you can see it can cause a lot of havoc. And as I had said earlier, the other problem that you can have with sulfonamide because of the presence of sulfur in particular patients is terrible allergic reactions, and you can get severe allergic reactions like skin burns. I once saw a child with terrible allergic reactions to sulfonamides or to sulfur. I think they had taken cotrimoxazole, and because of the sulfur, the whole skin was just peeling out. It looked like burns, and it was indeed sulfur reaction. So one has to be very, very careful when you give those drugs, because if you did give them to people who have allergic reactions, then it can be very difficult. Mechanism of action, I think we have already explained it very well. We are saying that they are competitive inhibitors of para-aminobenzoic acid, where they'll be incorporated in place of para-aminobenzoic acid and therefore inhibit the dihydroxysteroid enzyme or the dihydrofolate synthase suppression of growth of the microorganisms. So sulfonamide antibacterial exhibit a bacteriostatic rather than a bactericidal effect. And because this, we say this is because it is usually competitive or reversible in fibrillation. Folate is not synthesized in mammalian cells, but is instead a dietary requirement. And that is why whenever you have a mother who is expectant, you require a lot of folic acid in the purine, for the purposes of purine and pyrimidine synthesis, for the purposes of DNA, because of the multiplication of this newly developing fetus. And that is why at one time during the pregnancy, you must acid supplement. You must give them folic acid supplement, and if you do not, then you will have issues. This explains the selective toxicity to bacterial cells as compared to the host, because as I have said, the host uses folic acid ready-made and then acts on it using dihydrofolate reductase, or using dihydrofolate reductase, reduces the folic acid to tetrahydrofolate, which is then used. Must synthesize its own, and hence selective toxicity. Again, selective toxicity is very important for us, because when you have selective toxicity, then you minimize toxicity to the host. Again, this is just what we have discussed: dihydropteroid, or what we call pteridine plus para-aminobenzoic acid, and they are combining dihydropteroid synthetase blocked by sulfonamides, dihydropteroic acid, and then still the same enzyme acts here, the dihydropteroid synthetase, and you will want to get the dihydrofolic acid, which is now acted on or blocked. That enzyme, the reductase, is blocked by the trimethylprim, and of course you are not able to get your tetrafolic acid, which you require in the synthesis of the DNA, and hence you will have a lot of problems. Both trimethylprim and the sulfonamides interfere with the folate metabolism in the bacterial cell by competitively blocking the biosynthesis of tetrahydrofolate, which acts as a carrier. You have been talking about a carrier. The tetrahydrofolate is a carrier of one carbon moiety of fragments, and it is necessary for the ultimate synthesis of DNA, RNA, and bacterial cell wall protein. So, you know, and I've been saying that this tetrahydrofolate, it acts as a carrier of one carbon moieties. Usually it carries it as CHO. So that carbon is carried by tetrahydrofolate, and you carry it and you fix it in the synthesis of the purines. You carry it and you fix it in the synthesis of the pyrimidines, and therefore once you are not able to do it, then it means that you will have a problem. That's our para-aminobenzoic acid. That is our sulfoxazole. That is our trimethylprim. I think this is just, again, just what we have discussed. Trimethylprim tetrahydrofolic acid. It can be used, thymidine, to get DNA, purines. So it can be used in the synthesis of thymidine. I believe thymidine is synthesized from uracil by, again, addition of one carbon atom. You add one carbon atom to uracil to generate thymine or thymidine, and thymidine definitely is necessary for the synthesis of DNA. It is a pyrimidine. Then you have the purines, again necessary for DNA and RNA, and also using cofactors, also important in the synthesis of methionine, and of course also methionine is also used or necessary in the synthesis of trans-RNA and protein. So therefore, it is a very important core factor. It is a very important core factor. It is the tetrahydrofolate, very important core factor, which is used to carry that one carbon moiety, and therefore important in the synthesis of the purines and the pyrimidines, and ultimately the DNAs and the RNA. Why sulfanilamide or sulfonamides inhibit folic acid synthesis? We have already mentioned that, I think. The cells use folic acid as a single carbon atom building block for the construction of nucleic acid and other biological molecules. You've seen like methionine. Inhibition of this process prevents growth and reproduction, but does not directly lead to cell death. So we are saying you require the folic acid to carry the 1 carbon atom to build important nucleic acid and other biological molecules, like we have said thymidine and even methionine. So once you prevent that process, there will be, you slow down the growth and reproduction, but does not directly lead to cell death. Bacteria synthesize folic acid from the 2-amino-4-octo-6-methylpteridine diphosphate, which we call the pteridine moiety, the para-amino-benzoic acid, L-glutamic acid, whereas, of course, we have said the host does not. Because sulfur drugs are structurally, or because sulfur drugs structurally mimic para-amino-benzoic acid, they have structural resemblance with para-amino-benzoic acid, they bind to the dihydropteroid synthetase, one of the enzymes necessary for folic acid synthesis, reversible and competitive inhibition. With this enzyme inhibited, folic acid synthesis is prevented and cell growth and reproduction is halted. So we are only saying very different ways of explaining these things. So once we look at, we have said para-amino-benzoic acid and the sulfonamide have structural resemblance, and that's what we want to see now. If you look at this, this is our para-amino-benzoic acid. That's a para-amino-benzoic, and this here is our sulfonamide. So if you look at it, there is a primary arylamine. And remember we said this is necessary for activity. So both the sulfonamide and the para-amino-benzoic acid have the primary arylamine. For the sulfonamides that are prodrugs that have the amino acid conjugated with whatever it is conjugated with, then the succinyl and the phthalate sulfonamides, they are prodrugs, because that amino acid, free amino acid, you can see is necessary so that the sulfonamide has structural resemblance with the para-amino-benzoic acid, because they are competing for the same site. They're competing for the same site. And therefore, just as we talked about arachidonic acid and the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, there must be structural resemblance for these compounds to compete for the same site. Again, if you look at para-amino-benzoic acid, it has a phenyl ring. Sulfonamide has a phenylbenzene ring. Remember, we said that ring is necessary for activity. So para disubstituted benzene ring we said cannot be substituted at any other position, you will destroy activity. So you can see that structure. So the aniline is the same for both of them. Now, what differs is that in para-amino-benzoic acid, you have the carboxyl group, whereas in the sulfonamide, of course, you have the sulfamyl group. That is indeed the only difference. And you can't find it, but there is still some similarity in that this group is a polar group and this one is a polar group. So polar X, which got octane bonds. So we can here can form hydrogen bonds. This one here, this hydrogen can also form hydrogen bonds. So we are therefore saying the carboxylate group and the sulfamyl group have also some resemblance in that they are able, both of those groups are able to form polar. They're able to form polar bonds. But that is the only area that is different. And you remember us saying, if you try to replace this with the sulfonic acid, you lose activity. So that means that this group here, the sulfone moiety or the sulfone moiety, has some structural resemblance with the carboxyl group and allows this molecule, that's the sulfonamide, and indeed the para-amino-benzoic acid, to be able to compete for the same receptor. So you're saying sulfonamides and para-amino-benzoic acid are nearly of identical length, they have about 6.7 angstrom for para-aminobenzoic acid versus 6.9 angstrom for the sulfonamide. It should be sulfonamide group. So this and this, when we look at from here coming down there, here coming down there, the difference in terms of size, very little, nearly of identical length. Have an equal distribution of charge, that is delta positive on the amino group and delta positive on the delta negative on the carboxylic or sulfonamide group. So we are saying also have an equal distribution of charge. You will have a delta positive on the amino group and positive. This should definitely be a delta negative on this group here. This can carry, as we have said, this can be a polar group. Remember, we did mention this group here on ionization. When you lose this hydrogen, this group here carries a delta negative. Delta negative is for this position here. Then this also can lose a hydrogen, and therefore the carboxylic group can carry a delta negative, and the sulfonyl group can also carry a delta negative. Then you're saying delta positive on which amino group? Amino group carries a delta. Positive on which amino group? Because this one is not protonated at physiological pH. I don't see a positive in a way. Let us first of all leave the delta positive on the amino group. I'll find out what it means. But the other one, delta positive on the amino group and delta negative, this should be delta negative on the carboxylic group, all the sulfonamide group. And that we had discussed because we had said this group can lose a proton. Once it loses a proton, then this carries a negative that moves in. Once it moves in, that moves out, and that group will carry a delta negative. This for sure doesn't even need any movement. It is a carboxylic group, and the carboxylic group will be ionized at physiological pH. So that carboxylic group will carry a delta. That carboxylic group will carry a delta negative. So the one I'm not seeing is perhaps because the only delta positive we can have is when the only delta positive, by the way, we can have because of this oxygen. This oxygen has a very high electronegativity. Because it has a very high electronegativity, it will have a tendency of withdrawing electrons, and therefore this hydrogen can have a delta positive. So that hydrogen can very readily have a delta positive. We did mention also that of the sulfonamide group, and when we said because of this sulfonyl group or sulfone group, there is a tendency to withdraw electrons, a pool of electrons. And when the electrons are pulled, then this nitrogen can temporarily hold a delta positive. So that nitrogen can temporarily hold a delta positive. And that's when we say, when it holds that temporary delta positive, because it is normally, remember when we said it can hold briefly a delta positive. If it does hold a brief delta positive, it will strongly withdraw electrons from the hydrogen, and that is how the hydrogen is lost. So the only group which can hold a temporal, and I think that's the one they are calling this amino group, the only one which can hold a very temporary delta positive is this nitrogen, because of the withdrawal of electrons by the sulfone group. So that nitrogen can have a delta positive. This hydrogen can have a delta positive. So when we actually compare, the carboxylate ion can have, on ionization, will carry the hydrogen before it is ionized can carry a delta positive. The sulfone on ionization And what we say, stabilization by resonance can carry a delta negative. This nitrogen, because of the pool of electrons by the sulfone, can also carry a delta positive. So I believe that is what is being explained by those points, although the point there is not very clear. But this amino group can carry a delta positive, or if it's sulfonilamide, the only way that amino group can carry a delta positive is because of the pool of electrons by the sulfone. The nitrogen, the amino group carrying a slight positive, and therefore pulling the hydrogen, the electrons from the hydrogen, and allowing the sulfonilamide to undergo ionization, as we have explained. For this one, at any one time, the hydrogen being attached to a highly electronegative group will always carry a delta negative positive until it is lost. And of course, the carboxylic ion will, of course, carry a delta negative. So therefore, when we look at the para-aminobenzoic acid and we look at the sulfonamide, we are therefore saying there's a lot of structural similarity. And because of the structural similarity, even in terms of ionization and charge, then these molecules effectively compete for the same. They effectively compete for the same. They effectively compete for the same site. And once they compete for the same site, then the sulfonamide is able to prevent the para-aminobenzoic acid from binding. So if you look at it here, this is a para-aminobenzoic acid. So here we have a carboxylic ion. The carboxylic ion will bind its site through ionic bond. This area, which we have said this area is similar because you have that carboxylate ion which can, as we had explained, which will be similar to the sulfone. So this area here, you bind the site through ionic binding. Then we have both of them have the hydrophobic area. The hydrophobic area will bind through what we call hydrophobic bonds or van der Waals forces. The hydrophobic area binding there through hydrophobic bonds or what we call the van der Waals forces. Then both of them have an amino group. Amino group, because of the nitrogen being bonded to a hydrogen, there is a slight electron withdrawal, and therefore that amino group can bind its center through hydrogen bonds. This will bind through hydrogen bond because of the difference in electronegativity, and that hydrogen will carry a very slight positive. That hydrogen will carry a very slight delta positive and therefore bind. I think that's where they were saying the amino group. That amino group, we can carry a very slight delta positive, because remember again, to carry a very slight delta positive. Remember again also this lone pair of electrons moving in, and once they move in, making even this more electrophilic, and therefore that amino group actually can exist as a very slight, the hydrogen can exist as a very slight, or the amino group can exist as a very slight, the hydrogen will be having a deficiency of electrons. And once you have a deficiency of an electron, remember, whenever, and you have studied that in hydrogen bonds, whenever nitrogen is attached to a hydrogen, there is a difference in electronegativity, the nitrogen having more electronegativity compared to the hydrogen, and therefore the hydrogen being able to bond through hydrogen bonds, that one bonding through hydrophobic bonds, that one, because of that negative there, bonding through electrostatic or ionic bonds. So indeed, the amino group that we're talking about carrying a delta positive is not this amino group, as I was explaining, not this one. They were actually talking about this one, that says the amino group at position number 1, because of the difference in electronegativity, can carry a slight positive, interact with the receptor through hydrogen bonds. The hydrophobic center, which must be the same, interact through van der Waals forces of hydrophobic bonds. The carboxylic ion, which is ionized at physiological pH, interact through electrostatic or ionic bonds. And the same is observed of the sulfonamide. Same, that portion is the same, that portion is the same, and even this portion there, due to stabilization through the sulfone, then that is negative. So we are therefore saying the sulfonamide and the para-aminobenzoic acid have similar binding the receptor, and therefore the sulfonamide can effectively replace the para-aminobenzoic acid. But what is of importance is that when the sulfonamide replaces the para-aminobenzoic acid, it inhibits the enzyme. It binds the enzyme more strongly, inhibits the enzyme, and therefore prevents the synthesis of the dihydropteroid acid or dihydroic acid.
Hello.
Yes.
We have a practical now.
Thank you. Sorry for the delay. So therefore, I think we have almost finished. Excusing me, I can't be able to do as fast as I normally do. I'm still having a challenge with my voice, but I know it will come back. Everything will be back to normal. So we have very little remaining, and the lincosamides, I checked them, they're only 12 slides. So if I look at this, allow us to check how many more slides. 1, 2, 3. This is 4, 5, 6. This is what we have already done. Yeah. So you can see we have only about 3, 4 slides here. And as I have said, the lincosamides are only 12 slides. The shortest topic. Only 12 slides. So I know I need to rest my voice, but I think I have to push to finish. So if we could have another about 1 hour, we would be able to finish. We will communicate. So Jacinta,
yes,
you sign in, please. If possible, you can have the final lecture. If not possible, then we'll have it when you open. When are you expected to be exams?
The antibiotics exam is supposed to be on 7th.
At the 7th? Yeah. When are you opening?
We're opening on 3rd.
What?
The dean told me that he would inform you, but I don't know.
Aye, but you can't do it like that. How can we have it at where are we having? You're opening. When are the new exams? When are the exams starting?
Exams are supposed to start on 17th.
No, I will not allow it, because now when we need to polish, we cannot have it on the 7th. It's not possible. I will talk to him. We will have it with the other exams, because we don't even have enough time to read.
Yes.
You also need to have a cut, isn't it?
Yes.
Are you in agreement? Are you okay with that? Muko sawa?
With doing the exam on 7th or with
doing the exam on 7th.
Okay, he said it's because of the people who are repeating the unit, that from 17th they're supposed to be doing, I don't know, supplementaries. So they're supposed to do the exam earlier than 17th, so that the results are out before 17th, before they do their supplementaries.
I don't know, but I don't think that is in order. We are supposed to have 13 weeks. If 13 weeks end at 17th, the exam will be done on 17th. It's perhaps there's a first paper to be done, because I need my 13 weeks. Are we together? Anyway, I will talk to him, but to me, I think sometimes when you do things in such a great rush, it can mess everything. But anyway, we need only one more. Then you can organize. We only need one more lecture, and we are done with this. And also only one more lecture, and we'll be done with the antihistamine. If you count, I think the weeks we have not had 13 weeks, have we? As a term, have we finished 13 weeks this term?
I don't think so.
We haven't. And you know, the problem is some of our topics are so broad, and I've not yet learned the trick of Ruka. I've not yet learned that trick. So if I don't get my 13 weeks, then it becomes, in fact, we were supposed to be doing 14, 15 weeks. But if you don't, with this unit, they are broad. If you don't get the 13 weeks, then you find you have to struggle through. So anyway, just see whether we can be able to class for the antibacterial 2, as I have shown you, about 15 slides and we are done. And then only one more lecture for the non-steroidal. Now, once we have covered everything and you go for the break, then as to whether you start the exams on 7th or not, that will be some subject to discussion. All right. And of course, as I have said, it is important for you students also to make the dean understand whether you'll be well prepared, because you're the ones who are doing the exam. And if you fail, you will not come and say, hey, I needed that 1 week. You can only say it before we have given you the exam. So please look at it positively. If it is possible, we do it earlier. If it is not possible, even the student will still manage one way or other. But if you can prepare yourself over this holiday, I have no problem. Then if that means if you're opening on 3rd, when will we do the cut? Jacinta. Hello, Jacinta.
Yes. Yes.
So if you're opening on the 7th, on the 3rd, when will we do our cut?
Okay.
Can you discuss? Yeah.
Yes.
This is what I was saying. It can be very hectic in the end. So can you discuss? Yeah.
Yes.
That then we do the antibiotic cut first.
Yes.
Then we do the non-steroidals, perhaps even just before the main exam. But just discuss. Let us be in agreement. One of the best things, one of the necessary things with exams and assessment is that all of us are in agreement. All of us need to work together. With exams, you don't want some left behind, some saying, I'm not ready, whatever. We all must work as a team, whereby nobody after the exam can go and say, I'm going to sue the Daktari because he gave us the exam earlier than you were supposed to do it. We work together in agreement so that nobody at any other time will raise a question, because students are known to go to court for simple things. Are we together, students? So make sure that all of us are in agreement. So if you have signed in, then I think Jacinta organized for those 2 lessons and we are done.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.